Hey there, welcome to Drawing Expressions. I'm Parz, and for the last little while, I have been writing an episodic series based on Apothecaria, and this is the narration only for weeks 8 and 9. So it's like volume 3 or 4, something. Anyways, this is the next to last one. There will be one more after this, but yeah, for right now, this is the 4 episodes within weeks 8 and 9. So I hope you do enjoy them and listen through to the end and listen how the story progresses. So enjoy, and I will see you on the other side of all of this. Episode 15, Spring, Week 8, Cure episode, Meeting the Mayor.
Good morning. Sleep well?
I have to admit that I love to linger in bed in the morning to have daylight move from soft pink glow to bright white that pours in through the window. There's a warmth, a peace, a serenity that exists early in the day, the quality of which is unmatched at any other time. And stretched out in bed, relaxed, with all the cares of the world not knocking on my door or tapping me on the shoulder, it's heaven. So for my eyes to report a very bleary yet very alert familiar sitting on my chest, eyes bright and whiskers twitching away, wasn't welcome. But I wasn't awake enough to complain. Much.
Was he?
I also managed to stretch and yawn in accompaniment to my brilliant question. Mouse Eye stayed firmly fixed as I made motions to get up.
Have you checked in on Fen lately?
I stopped stretching and was insta-awake. What, is he okay?
But you should check on him.
There was still this energy, this eagerness that Mouse Eye was annoyingly radiating. Okay, so if it's not an emergency, I think I'll take my time, eat some breakfast, then walk over.
Must you?
I closed my eyes, took a breath, counted to 10, then tried again. How about if I skip my pleasant start of the day activities and instead walk over to check on Fen?
Great idea. I'll see you there.
And with that, he leapt off me and landed not in the cottage. I don't know if I'll ever get used to his disappearing trick. Since I was essentially being rushed out to check in on Fen in a non-emergency situation, I tossed on a nightshirt, slipped on some shoes, and headed for Fen's place. Fen, the fen toad who'd come home with me after a bog goblin attack, had settled in nicely next to the little stream where I gather water. A huge tree grows there, creating shade under its huge canopy. I can see myself spending a lot of time there during the heat of summer. The net result was that I would collect water from there and would sometimes see Fen. I hadn't seen him for a couple of days, so my level of concern was high, despite Mouse Eyes' assurance that nothing was amiss with him. It's a relaxing short walk to the stream and tree, a couple of minutes most days. Today's trip was shorter because I was walking quickly. As I approached, I started calling Fen's name, hoping he'd hop out and let me know everything was okay. I called. Fen hopped out. I smiled in relief. Fen looked up into the tree. I followed his gaze. My jaw dropped. Mouse Eye appeared in the tree with a big grin, then disappeared again, but far from laughing with him, I was busy picking my jaw up off the ground. You see, on a large bough and leaning against the trunk sat a man. An older man. A quite large older man, a half-naked, in only underthings, quite large older man, snoring. A bewildering array of questions began to demand access to my now quite alert thinking apparatus. Who is he? Why is he here? Why are his shirt and trousers lying on the ground? And how did he get up there? I mean, it'd be hard for me to climb up there, so how? I approached. Slowly, cautiously. Hello, sir? Hello? Then I stepped back a few paces. I watched as he woke up. He somehow simultaneously nearly lost his balance, cradled his head, and made as if he was going to be sick. Oh, my head, he groaned. I called up again. Hello, sir. Please, not so loud. Oh. Are you unwell? It's only that I feel like death. And where am I? I told him. He nodded, then leaned his head back against the tree again. Did you eat or drink something that didn't agree with you? Eat? No. Drink? I don't think I had that much last night. Okay, make that a very hungover, half-naked, quite large older man. Sir, let me see what I have in the cottage for hangovers. I'll be back in a minute. He just groaned again. As I made my way to the cottage, Mouse-Eye reappeared on my shoulder, laughing. I don't understand why someone suffering from a hangover can be seen as so funny to some. So I asked him. He shrugged. It's funny. How are we going to get him down from there? Because him falling and possibly breaking a bone won't be funny at all. Mouse-Eye just laughed again. I'm not sure how a mouse is supposed to be of help with this issue. I was hoping you'd have an idea for getting him down. I wasn't suggesting you sling him over your shoulder and bodily carry him down. Mouse-Eye shrugged. He got up there. I'm sure he can get down, just like a cat can, you know. As we'd been talking, I'd looked up hangovers in the old witch's book. Crow coal, the first reagent I'd ever picked up, was perfect. I brewed up 2 cups of tea, added crushed crow coal into one, and headed back. The man was still in the tree. Sir, I called up, I've got a remedy for your hangover here, but you're going to have to get yourself down from there. I have no idea how I got up here, but I suppose if I managed it, I can get myself down. Stand clear. I watched as he maneuvered himself one way, then the other, then stopped. It might be easier if I had my clothes. The bark is sure to hurt otherwise. I tossed up his clothes. They were relatively clean, but did stink of smoke and drink. As he struggled to put them on, I asked, Why did you take your clothes off last night? I don't remember taking them off, but I can only guess I worked up a sweat getting up here. I'm glad to have them now. It's quite chilly. Whether the chill was from the coolness of the stream or another symptom of the hangover, I wasn't sure, but it was good to see that he managed to dress himself, more or less. That could only help to make him more comfortable and pad against injuries from disembarking from the branch. He took a minute to rest, then tried getting down again. It was awkward, and probably not the way he got up there, but a bit of effort and a bunch of gravity did the trick. I should add that it was good he was wearing clothes. The scrapes he would have gotten in rather delicate places would have hurt something fierce. After his pseudo-fall, he just lay there, groaning. While I felt for him, it was also difficult to feel too badly for him. He was the one who'd gotten drunk, wandered onto my property, climbed the tree, and spent the night there undressed. So after waiting for what I thought was an adequate amount of time, I strode over and handed him his enriched tea. He took a sip, made a face, then set it aside. Gah! What's that taste? Don't you hear of any wine or beer? Something that doesn't taste like ashes? Now, I knew I had honey at my disposal, but I opted not to use it. Instead, I just told him that the only way the potion would work was if he downed it all in one go. He made a face at me, grimaced at the cup, clearly contemplated deliberately spilling it, then held his nose and downed it. I sipped my tea as the medicinal one worked its healing magic. As I continued to sip, his groaning stopped and his body uncoiled, no longer trying to hold itself still. I still hadn't finished my cup by the time he was standing upright, looking far less gray and not in imminent danger of vomiting. In fact, he looked at the stream almost eagerly. Would you mind if I... He gestured towards the water. I shrugged. Come to the cottage when you're done. I'll have a warm towel ready so you can dry off. As I carried the empty cups back home, I heard the telltale splashing of someone bathing. Knowing my last patient was occupied, I looked for and found Mouse-Eye, who jumped from a low-hanging branch onto my shoulder. Do you know who that is? Mm-hmm. Care to share? No. And may I know why you won't share?
No.
Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if our roles were reversed, with me as the familiar and Mouse Eye as the witch. Would I find as much pleasure in withholding information as a certain rodent finds it? But since something like that happening was about as likely as a tree growing upside down, I don't usually dwell on the thought. But today was an unusual day. I got a towel heated, as promised, and then puttered about until my mystery patient arrived to warm up. It didn't take long for him to arrive. The stream runs cold. And eventually he was sitting in front of the fire, bundled, and finally in the condition where he was ready to talk. I decided to start off. I'm Mistress Sweetwater, the current witch and occupant of this witch's cottage, although that wasn't the name you used when you first enrolled in the herbology school. He looked at me, watching to see how I'd react to his knowing all that about me. I managed to not react. You have the advantage of me. Please tell me who you are. He sat up straighter, trying to look more impressive. I'm the Lord Mayor of High Rannoch. Now things were starting to strike me as funny. The Lord Mayor of High Rannoch was sitting in front of my fire, steam gently rising from his head, wrapped in a towel. I started giggling. What is so funny, young lady? I am a highly respected figure in this community, whereas I've heard a thing or two about you. That stopped the giggles and brought out the outrage. What was funny was seeing you, the Lord Mayor, warming yourself in front of my fire after washing off the last of last night's excess. What is no longer funny is you threatening me in my home, particularly after brewing you a potion. So now, if the Lord Mayor would deign to pay the witch the 20 silver due, he may then leave. He didn't seem to hear me. Madame Wintergleam says you lack discipline and decorum, that you lack the character needed to be a witch. How would she know what's needed? All those students are trapped inside the school's walls. To the degree that you assaulted a current student of the school, nearly piercing his, tender bit, in self-defense after he assaulted me, and from what I've seen, you lack the requisite requirements to inhabit this cottage. So who's trying to toss me out? I think I'll grant the doctor his request to take over here and turn it into a health retreat center. The doctor, of course. Things got awfully quiet at that point. I was ready to do something. I had no idea what I was ready to do, but the one thing I wasn't going to do was back down. For his part, he wasn't angry or even emotional. He was just watching for me to do or say something stupid, like cry or beg. Neither was going to happen. Ahem. We both turned towards the mantelpiece. Mouse Eye was standing on his hind feet. I do believe, Oliver Chutney, Lord Mayor of High Rannoch, said the Lord Mayor of High Rannoch, that you are currently sitting, cured of your hangover, inside a cottage that was deeded to itself, meaning you have no authority to do anything to my mistress, this residence, or these grounds. Further, while you can cherry-pick opinions that aren't favorable to my mistress, I think you'll find that the only opinion here concerning you is currently quite negative. And if it were revealed just how inebriated you were last night, how hungover you were this morning, and that you spat upon the current witch's hospitality, care, and cure, I think you'll lose what little respect people have for you. And trust me when I say I'll make sure that becomes the talk of the town. It got quiet again. I tried my best to not tear up as Mouse Eye defended me. Instead, I just stood upright, haughtily even, with a small grin on my face. I take it this is Mortimer. I believe there is more to the elaborate name than Madame Hightowers' domestic. Francie, I supplied, couldn't quite remember. Mouse Eye bowed. Oliver looked back and forth at Mouse Eye and I. You're quite the formidable pair. And yes, I've heard good things too. So how about this? We don't talk about my whereabouts or condition over the past 24 hours, and I'll leave you in peace and allow you to do your work as you see fit. I translated his offer in my head. He'll give me what I already have, in exchange for maintaining patient confidentiality, which he already has. I shot a questioning look at Mouse Eye with a small shrug of acceptance. He did the same back. Accepted, but you will pay for that hangover cure before you leave. He raised his hands in surrender, then sought out his money pouch. As the coins were placed on the table, the mayor said, "I'm glad High Rannoch is a strong and knowledgeable witch, and, frankly, quite scary when riled. I trust you'll remember our agreement." I simply nodded. He nodded back. "Good day to you, Mistress Mortimer." And he left. I waited impatiently for 10 minutes to pass before the primal scream that had been brewing was allowed out. While there were words of rage and frustration in there, mostly it was just white-hot, pure emotion that poured forth. That felt good to just let it release. And after a wash in the cold stream and then a thaw in front of the fire, I felt renewed. Still angry, but fresh and capable and strong. And then I found Mouse Eye, got him into the palm of my hand, and kissed his head. He blushed, I think.
"So, what else shall we do today?"
he asked. I needed to work out my frustrations with more than just one good lungful of vocal release. I needed a walk. No, more than that. I needed full body exertion. I needed some time out in nature, and if it meant I could gather a reagent or two, I'd take that as part of the package deal. I needed to spend some time with Miss Bogfire and Blastfire Bog. At the very least, I could replenish my crow coal. Crow coal. The first reagent I'd ever gathered had just been used. Gosh, that was a trigger to some self-reflection. The me of 8 weeks ago had gathered something, having no clue that the me of today would use it as a hangover remedy. Funny how that worked out. I rushed through the remaining bits of my morning routine so that I could be gone for as long as I could manage, or at least for as long as I wanted. Who knows, the me of an hour from now might be very ready to come back to the cottage. As we walked to Kunks's Landing, my name for the dock next to the industrious bog goblin who made not just Miss Bogfire, but all of her watercraft siblings, I wondered how Mouse Eye had known so much about the legal status of the cottage and the current political climate for the mayor. I knew if I asked, I'd be told that he watches. I guess what I really wanted to know is not so much what he watches, but how he does. How can he know about things that he, presumably, wasn't here for? What else has he watched? Or, correction to that last question, what else does he know? Does he know about my life prior to being a witch? Does he know about the old witch? Does he know Pip? I suppose as time and tide dictate, I'll find out. Or not. The walk to the bog did me good. My head was clearer, my body warmed up and ready to go for a paddle, and my sense of adventure was prepped to head out and explore. Kunk, too, was in a good mood when I arrived at the dock.
"Ha! You here? Good day. Sun here. Fish jump. Good day."
Together, we put my coracle in the water. As I paddled down a channel, Kunk waved before setting to work again. Trusting that Mouse Eye could direct me home, I just went where my mood sent me, through wide open channels 1 minute, then down nearly choked off passages the next. It was maybe a couple of hours before I decided that I needed a bit of a break and headed for a piece of dry land dominated by a tall tree. The shade was super inviting. Pulling my boat up and securing it to the huge trunk ensured my boat, and my only way back home, absent a very mucky and long swim, was secure. I laid back, watched the clouds, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. I breathed in the sun and breathed out anger. I breathed in serenity and breathed out disquiet. I breathed in light and breathed out gray smoke. Not literally, of course. In all of this, I may have dozed off. Probably dozed off. I dozed off. Mouse Eye says I snored loud enough to prevent anyone else from catching a few Z's. What finally brought me out of my reverie was the cawing of crows who just flown onto a branch of the tree. When I looked up at them, I spotted the nest I'd missed seeing before now. This might be a chance to get some coal. Unlike the last time when I'd been lucky enough to spy some on the ground, this time I was going to have to negotiate with these birds. The thing to know about crows is that they are some of the most obnoxious and rude birds around. The only reason harpies have the rotten reputation that they do is that they speak human. Crows don't bother speaking in any other language but their own and can still leave you feeling massively insulted. I managed to climb up to a level where I could converse with the birds and did my best to ask for some of their crow coal. I offered to do a trade. I said I could recite poetry or sing a song. They started cawing viciously. There was no physical threat, but they'd let me have it verbally. I'd guarded against exactly this, but still, some words, some feelings got through. Whoever it was that said that sticks and stones can break bones, but words can't hurt you, never met crows. I did eventually get the coal because a crow, in frustration at my not leaving, flung it at me. Correction, towards me. If it had been at me, it might have been okay. I could have caught it or somehow trapped it with my body, but the throw was only roughly in my direction. In my excitement of trying to catch it, which I did, yay me, I overleaned and fell off the branch. Luck was with me in that I fell onto a soft landing spot, a rotting soft log that kept me from landing heavily on the ground. The giant puff of mushroom spores that erupted out of the log was like a fog, and I breathed in a giant lungful. Of a sudden, I was both myself and yet something more. I suppose I became a part of the mushroom network, seeing and feeling and knowing things about the bog that I had no other way of knowing. I sensed individual plants growing, troops of ants bringing home food from distant lands along well-worn tracks, roots seeking water and nutrients and the pumping of vital fluids along stalks, branches, and trunks. I was a part of the bog, and it was a part of me. Harmonized being. Oneness. Totality. Somewhere in all of that, I felt a gentle yet insistent tapping on my right cheek.
Sweet, we need to get moving. It's getting late.
I opened my eyes and met the concerned look of Mousei.
Are you okay?
I took a deep breath and remembered what happened on my last deep breath. Mousei seemed to know my concern.
It's safe. I think you've made sure there won't be any new mushrooms anywhere near here. A kilometer or two away? Yes, but not here.
He smiled as he said it. I believe it was a smile of relief. Broken pictures of the vision I'd had kept forcing their way into my consciousness. I started to get up, perhaps too quickly.
Take your time. You're awake, and that's good. But take a minute before we do anything else.
I forced myself to take that needed minute, but I wasn't happy doing it. I felt the need to move. I had to move. There were things I wanted to do, needed to do before I lost all memory of what I'd seen. Going to Miss Bogfire, I untied her, jumped in, and started to get ready to paddle.
I'd offer to get us home, but you know.
Mousei held up his little mouse arms and flecked his paws. It's okay. I know where I'm going. And we set off, deeper into the bog.
Home's that way.
Mousei pointed to a channel I wasn't going to go down. Yep, I know, but we're going this way. I paddled with what felt like the strength of 10 strong men.
Okay.
Mousei started to nervously flit around on the boat, looking this way and that, clearly unsure of what I was up to. To be honest, I wasn't sure of what I was doing either. I just felt the need to paddle. The coracle seemed to know the way. We headed deeper and deeper into the bog until we nearly reached a place where bog and Glimmerwood Grove met. I hopped out, almost forgot to tie off the line, then sprinted towards a grove of oak trees. Mousei got there first.
Here's some shield cap, although why we needed to come all the way here, I'm sure I don't know.
I ignored him and swept past. I wouldn't talk. I knew what I was looking for was close. It took a few minutes of digging through undergrowth to pull out my prize. Amethyst antlers. It was a huge rack. The ancient deer that dropped these must have been magnificent. Mousei just gasped.
Why?
I heard him stammer his questions, but I couldn't answer. The feeling of another reagent somewhere else in the bog was calling to me. Answering Mousei's questions would have broken the spell. I just hauled the antlers into the coracle and made ready to paddle. What vision of the here and now I had showed me, Mouse Eye was still standing by the shield caps, arms crossed, muttering to himself. I couldn't wait, but didn't want to leave him behind, so I jumped out, grabbed semi-blindly at both my confused familiar and the mushrooms. I somehow grabbed both, raced back to the boat, and we headed off again.
Where are we headed now?
Looking back, I've never heard Mouse Eye sound so uncertain. It would have been hysterical if I hadn't been so focused on the next destination. All I could manage was a quick shake of the head, asking that questions be held until the appropriate Q&A period, which wasn't now. I paddled, the coracle steered, the sun set. I paddled, the coracle steered, the night deepened. I paddled, the coracle landed on a bit of land. The shadows cast by the rising moon shaped the darkness into fuzzy blobs of midnight outlined by silvery glints of dew-covered foliage. I stumbled out and pretty much beelined towards a large tree. I sloshed and splashed, heedless of what was in my way, whether plant, animal, or water channel. Thankfully, nothing too deep, although I did go waist-high on one step. While I didn't know what they were called then, I now know they were called grunblut limpets. And within their thick shells, which were open to allow the moonlight in, sat midnight morsels. I scooped some out, stored them in my kit, and then felt the raging fire of need and motivation drain out of me. I was exhausted, trembling, absolutely knackered. Mouse Eye appeared on my shoulder and to his credit talked me back to Miss Bogfire, even leading me down a much better path that involved a lot less immersion. At the boat, I was a mess. I wanted to go home, but didn't have the strength to even attempt it. Mouse Eye talked me through getting into the coracle and pushing off. I more or less collapsed into the bottom of the boat.
You sleep, we'll be fine, I'll keep watch,
I remember hearing him say. And then, I think I was dreaming. Or maybe it was more than a dream. It started with me in my cottage. It's still a bit strange to claim ownership of it. Sitting in front of the fire with the spirit house sitting on the mantelpiece. And as I watched, the spirit house got closer and closer, bigger and bigger, until I was in it, through it, and looking out the other side. At the inside of a cottage that looked a bit like mine, but wasn't. And a girl, my age, maybe, but not me, talking to 3 ducks, named Mabel, Judy, and Julie. As I looked closer, I saw a familiar mousy face peer out from a pocket in her clothes, holding a chocolate chip cookie. I gasped, which drew the attention of a small owl who, with a flick of her wing, I felt rather than heard a snap. My vision swam for a minute, but then I saw yet another similar cottage, and yet another witch, and yet another setting, and then another, and then another, and another. They began to blur and speed past me, cottages and witches and familiars, all both somewhat familiar but also rather strange. I awoke with a whimper. My body ached, my head felt woozy, and my nose began informing me that we were still deep in the bog.
Welcome back.
Mouse Eye's look of concern helped warm my heart.
I'm guessing those mushroom spores did a number on you.
I nodded, stretched, yawned.
Are you feeling okay?
I nodded again, then mumbled, yeah. Then, I think I'm ready to get us home if you're up to navigating.
Ready, willing, and able, Captain.
And thus began the slow and careful trip home in the dark. As I paddled, I figured a bit of conversation would help pass the time. So I told Mouse Eye about what I'd felt and seen since being dosed with mushroom spores. Mouse Eye listened politely, asked questions here and there. When I asked him about his eating what I presumed was one of Pips's chocolate chip cookies, he got a bit quiet. And when I asked him to share with his favorite witch the next time he went there, and certainly not expecting any sort of answer because it had been just a dream, right? He actually blushed in embarrassment before giving me an abashed,
"Must I?"
Episode 16. Spring, Week 8, Rest Episode, Vapor Trail. There's a story I heard once, some time ago. It goes like this. One day, 2 monks were walking along and came across an old woman who was trying to cross a river. Because the river was wide and flowed quickly, she feared for her safety. The junior of the 2 monks passed by her and crossed. The elder of the two offered to help. She climbed onto his back, and he carried her safely across. Many hours later, the elder noticed the junior had something to say, and so asked him what was on his mind. The junior monk confronted the elder, saying, "We are forbidden to consort with women, let alone have any sort of physical contact with them, and yet you allowed that old woman to climb onto your back." The elder monk replied, "I left her at the riverbank, but you have been carrying her with you for hours." One idea, of the many interpretations possible, is that you act, and that once you have, to let it go. It's supposed to remind you to stay in the present moment. Try as I might, the episode with the mayor is still on my back. It's done, dealt with, over, finished, and you'd think after everything I'd experienced in Blast Fire Bog, which, let's be honest, was incredibly cool, super strange? Yes. Exhausting? Also yes, but so worth it. I'd have exorcised the whole thing, but I hadn't. It was still niggling at me, still occupying my mind, still slung on my back like an involuntary backpack. I needed to do something that would give me something else to focus on. Business had been good, I had plenty of silver, and so a bit of retail therapy might be the thing. If I couldn't exorcise the thoughts away, maybe I could spend them away, which is why I was on my way to Bits and Bob's. If nothing else, spending some time with Bob would be a lovely thing. Once in town, I noticed a couple of things. One was that there were more people out and about than I'd seen before. I didn't recognize anyone, not that that was any surprise given how little time I'd spent in the town and how few, relatively, people I'd treated. What was a surprise was how quiet people got when they spotted me. I tried telling myself it was because they were seeing a witch and that it carried some weight, but I didn't believe me. At Bits and Bob's, Madame Wintergleam was finishing up a transaction, chatting away with Bob. That is, up until I entered. Actually, not quite true. It wasn't until she noticed who had entered that her pleasantries quickly petered out. She avoided looking at me, bid Bob a fine day, and left. She didn't even acknowledge my greeting. I decided it was because she hadn't gotten over my quitting her class. I was already carrying the mayor. There was no way I was going to carry more. I greeted Bob, and he returned it, but it was awkward. There was definitely something going on. Bob definitely knew what, and I was definitely not leaving until I'd found out what it was. "Bob, originally I came here to do a bit of shopping, but now that I think on it, I'm here for two things. A bit of shopping, and to find out why everyone is acting so weird." He smiled at me, nearly sincerely, before asking if there was anything in particular I had my eye on. "Yes, the truth. What's going on?" He deflated a bit, grimaced, then said, "There's a rumor going around saying that you and the mayor are, I didn't like where that was going, but I wasn't going to have the rest of the sentence left unsaid. "Where what, Bob?" He refused to look me in the eye. Affair. People think you are having an affair with the mayor." "An affair? Why in the world would anyone think that?" With the terrible secret rumor no longer secret, he started talking a bit more freely. The other night, the mayor had had a lot to drink. Before he left the Copper Fox, he announced he was going to your cottage to, as he put it, show that upstart of a girl who's in charge of High Rannoch. And people watched as he staggered towards your place. It was his not returning until late the next morning that the whispers started. Fury started to burn inside me, but it quickly died out with the memory of that fat, hungover, half-naked man falling awkwardly out of my tree. Okay, I said at first, then tried to say the rest without my laughter interrupting. "Bob, did you and I have an affair when you came to me for help?" He still looked miserable, still wouldn't meet my gaze. "They're saying you're a homewrecker. He has kids." "Bob," I repeated, "did you and I have any sort of inappropriate anything when you came for treatment for your kludgy mouth?" He mumbled, "No." "No." Then, after a deep breath, I continued. "I don't know what the mayor was thinking when he was drunk or why he said what he said. I won't talk about anything concerning my patients, any of them, and I look sharply at Bob, but please know that nothing inappropriate or unprofessional occurred between he and I. Bob just nodded, dumbly. I don't know if anyone will believe me, and frankly, I don't care, which was an obvious lie, but what the heck. But of all the people in this wretched town who I want to know the truth, it's you. He gave a little laugh, if a bit forced. I'm sure this will just blow over in time. It's just a rumor. Yeah, right. There was no way this rumor was going to blow over quickly. Mentally, I watched as my reputation, my business, my livelihood was going to be destroyed by an arrogant drunk. The laughter in my soul tamped down as that scenario played out in my head. I needed to get out. Quickly. It was too much. Just all too much. But I couldn't get myself to step out the door, let alone walk another gauntlet of unspoken judgmental shame. So I grinned, against everything I was feeling, forced myself to stand upright, and asked if he had any brooms for sale. Talking merchandise seemed to put more normalcy back into the room. Oh, sure, all sorts really. Different handle lengths, bristle types, wood choices, colors. I interrupted. Flying ones. Do you have any of those? Of course. Flying ones. Of course. I closed my eyes. Bob, what is it now? He cleared his throat. Well, I do have one. She's not much, but Great, I'll take it. Would you like to see it first? Nope. How much is it? It's, would you like a helmet? Nope. How much? Do you need instructions on flying her? No. Right. Okay, I'll just package it up for you and no need. You go get it. I'll leave the silver on the counter and meet you out back. Okay, great. How much silver should be waiting on the counter for you? Would 100 be asking too much? 100 it is. I'll count it out while you get it. Bob stepped out and I just stood there, shaking. Of all the patients I'd seen, and a few of them had stayed overnight at the cottage while I'd collected reagents, why had this particular patient triggered such a rumor? No doubt his announcement to the Copper Fox patrons had been important, but has that been all? Was it being helped along by someone, and if so, why? I shook my head to clear it, tried once again to take off the mayoral backpack that had now seemingly fused itself to me, counted the silver onto the table, and went out the back to see my new purchase. Given Bob's hesitancy, I didn't expect to see much. I wasn't disappointed. Brooms can come in a variety of shapes and types. Most, of course, don't fly. But of the ones that do, you can't simply look at it to know if it flies. There's a magical feeling, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and not everyone resonates with every broom. I'll note that I knew none of this before I talked with Bob. Mouse-Eye told me all this after I got home, so while I could have just paid a huge amount of money to sweep my floors, it turns out I lucked out again. If the land is responsible for my run of luck, it has to be working overtime. When I first laid eyes on the broom, I instantly saw what Bob saw, an ill-kept, bristle-bare, knotted and mottled handle relic of a prior age. Here it is, mistress. Bob pointed to it almost apologetically. I bought it as part of an estate sale of sorts. I was given an inventory list, and this was listed as a frying broom. I paid top silver for it. Sight unseen, you see. I've just been storing it, not sure what to do with it, and I hope you're happy with your purchase. Of course, if it isn't to your satisfaction, I'll give you a full refund. I heard Bob, and I guess on one level I listened, but on another I was connecting to this unsightly thing. But there was more here than met the eye. Of course, it's an older model, so doesn't have the lumbar support or the new cushioned memory bristles that are now being produced. Of course, those can go for a lot more than 100 silver, so I hope you feel, after setting eyes on her, it's fair. Deep within its twisted handle, arcing from its half-circle burst of bristles, I couldn't identify what they were made of, there was something, subtle, for sure, but undeniable. She was perfect. He had it propped up, bristles up, next to the door. Here, let me get it for you. As Bob reached for it, it shot past his closing hand and landed neatly in mine. Bob looked over his shoulder at me and at the broom that had just come to life. Oh, I didn't know you're an experienced broom wrangler. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was deep in the experience of the broom and all that she was. After a few seconds, I released her and had her hold steady for mounting. Now, there's a misconception that all flying brooms are flown by sitting on the handle. Not true. Not only would it be terribly uncomfortable, it'd be absolutely unstable. It'd be so easy to slide off to one side as the broom did a barrel roll on the other way, which is why most brooms have you sit cross-legged on the bristles. I climbed on, kicked off the ground, and launched. My eyes were pointed at the sky. I didn't want to look back and down at high Rumorville. The load I'd been carrying? Gone. The confusion and hurt from hearing the ridiculous rumor? Disappeared. My anger at it all? Evaporated, eviscerated, eliminated. And I was simply elated. It felt so good to be flying again. Just for kicks, I flew through a cloud. That feeling of the air whooshing past. What a rush. And the trail I left in the sky dragging a bit of cloud along. In that moment, I named her Vapor Trail. I was like a kid in a candy shop. No, I was like a dog, one of those breeds that loves water, playing on a riverbank. No, I was like myself lingering in a warm bed on a cool morning. I just loved every minute and I really, really didn't want to stop. So I didn't. I swooped and swerved and dove and climbed. If I could think of it, Vapor Trail could do it. There was one moment where I did start thinking about a barrel roll and Vapor Trail started rolling. But it was that errant thought that led to an amazing discovery. My butt was held to the bristles like iron to a magnet. I inverted all the way through the roll and, while discombobulating, wasn't fatal. Good to know! After flying for a few hours, I decided to take the opportunity to land and stretch my legs. Sitting cross-legged is only comfortable for so long. I found an island within the Cloud Isles with a pond and some trees for shade. It was good to lay back on my own private island and to take a dip, or three, in my private swimming pool. Ah, the world with all its cares and concerns and troubles was down there. This place, this peaceful, solitary place was just lovely. I think if I ever retire from witching, I'll set myself up here. As good as it all felt, the warm sun, the cool water, the comforting shade, I also wanted to feel the wind and race across the sky and do loop-de-loops and be silly. The day was getting on and I was getting tired, but I also wanted to check out one last place. I'd spotted an island that sported a large cave, the mouth of which was so big I could fly into it. I couldn't resist. I flew more cautiously as I entered the cave. It was a little tight, but totally workable. With the discovery, I found myself wondering if I'd ever walk anywhere ever again. Looking at the textures within the cave walls was like looking at clouds and seeing different shapes and things. Here a wing, there a serpentine body, over there a giant closed eye. It was fun letting my imagination run free. And then my imagination started working overtime, seeing myself as I flew hither and yon with kids coming out from houses and buildings pointing up at me as I came to visit. It felt so good, so affirming as the local witch. A sound, I suppose what I imagined the kids would sound like, escaped through my lips, and it echoed. What fun! Echoes. And so I let loose with a little bit of nonsensical song and played with the sound bouncing back. The roar that followed wasn't expected, nor the two eyes that opened deeper in the cave. It was then that I realized the winged snake shape I'd disregarded was, 1, not part of the cave, but instead lived in it, and 2, it was a wyvern. There was a part of me, for a quick second, that tried discerning whether the creature in front of me was a wyvern or a dragon. That small part stopped its zoological classification and instead decided to table the discussion for later. The wyvern made to launch at me, and I found myself drifting backwards. I didn't know the broom came with reverse, but I'm glad it did. I got clear of the cave mouth and shot off, hoping the wyvern would either lose interest, with me now being gone, or would lose sight of me and break off its pursuit. Neither happened. All the practice I'd gotten in was paying dividends. I wasn't losing it, but I wasn't being snatched out of the sky and turned into wyvern food. Every move I tried, it responded to. Every attempt to outrace, outspin, or outroll didn't work. It nearly got me time and again. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare land and hide, didn't dare do anything. I couldn't lose it in the cloud or two that was up here. I needed a plan. And then I spotted my chance. Laughing out loud with fear and hope, I knew it was a desperate move, but I had nothing left. I flew into a canyon of sorts being formed as two big islands drifted close to each other. It narrowed so much that it could fit me but couldn't accommodate the wyvern's wingspan. It had to maneuver itself to keep from being crushed. After shooting through the gap, I dashed for a nearby forested hiding spot and hunkered down. The wyvern wasn't ready to give up. Instead of flying all around the canyon I'd exited, plus the islands surrounding it, including my current hiding spot, it wasn't until well after sundown that it finally relented and left. After all the excitement, you'd think I'd have made my way home. And you'd be right, to a point. You see, as I started my way back, or what I assumed was the way back, I spotted blue-green light coming from a height, and I just had to check it out. There are two things I learned. One, there is a lighthouse on top of Moonbreaker Mountain, and two, it emits the most beautiful, it's not quite light, but also not quite water. When I told Mousei about it later, he said it's called plasma. I called it fun. I could fly through it and have trails of it swirl in my wake. I must have done that for, well, I lost track of time. But it wasn't that long, but it felt like I'd spent all night playing. It was still night, however, when I got my bearings and finally headed home. I landed, stretched, yawned. Spent though I was, my spirit was still riding a high. I dragged my aching body into the cottage, broom in tow. The welcome glow of pop helped settle me. I was back in my home, my space, my safe space. I breathed a sigh of relief. Mousei looked up from his place inside the spirit house.
I see you bought a broom, and I'm guessing you went up to the Cloud Isles. What'd you do up there?
A mischievous grin crossed my face. You want me to tell you about my adventures today? Mousei closed his eyes, knowing full well what was coming, but still played along.
Yes. Tell me about your adventures today. What did you do? Tell me everything.
Without giving the necessary pause to give the answer the punch it deserves, I jumped in with, Must I? Smiling at each other, sharing in the joke, we laughed. And then we watched, each from our own vantage point, as Pop began to change in hue, in intensity, in color. She began to expand at the middle and dip at the poles, and then, suddenly, she divided into two Pops, each the same size as the other, floating side by side, indistinguishable. Then one of them floated over to the broom and attached itself to the end of the handle, making a running light of sorts. Mousei's and my gaze met again, and with a mutual shrug of incomprehension, we wondered what else this night would bring. Episode 17. Spring, Week 9, Cure episode, The Elf and the Sphinx. I don't normally leave an entry on a cliffhanger, but I did in my last one. And at the time, I did wonder what the night would bring. It had already been a day full of learning new things, seeing new places, being chased by an entirely new, to me anyway, creature. So no wonder if I wondered what else would happen or be revealed. And to be fair, a couple of things were revealed after that last entry, and something that had happened that I didn't squeeze into my journal last time. Mousei told me about the nature of flying brooms, especially the old ones. The newer ones are made for anyone to fly. They're quite generic. But the old ones, they were built in a way that, if you didn't resonate with it, it'd present as a perfectly ordinary broom, or at least as a nothing particularly special flying broom. How awesome is it that this old broom, Vapor Trail, did resonate with me? Speaking of the broom and Pop, Throughout the night, Pop, the one attached to Vapor Trail, continued to divide and flow and morph. It was like watching festive lights multiply and grow all over a tree. The handle now glows very gently, with all of its twisted, knotty, mottled glory. The entirety of her bristles now also glow amber, and there are definitely far more light bristles than there were original ones. The overall result is just completely magical. I have to share with Pip. Maybe this is a way to keep Pop Olak safe in whatever dimensions they exist. However, reality also came knocking and reminded me that, while flying fast and high in the open sun can be fun, it's also a source of skin burn. Sunburn, windburn. Oof, my skin wasn't happy. It took a couple of days for a lovely brown tan to develop. The color is reminiscent of smooth tree bark. During the couple of days that I took it easy, waiting for my skin to recover, Mouse Eye gave me a note from Pip. I grinned when I saw it, then grimaced when my cheeks pushed their burned selves up, then groaned when the grimace creased those same burnt areas. Note to self, I need a salve for this. But back to the note. I read it and I learned something new. My dearest, bestest friend, Sweet. Your world sounds like a scary place. I can't imagine living through all of the adventures you've shared with me. You are so brave. Sweet the brave. My life is much quieter than yours, thankfully, but your life sounds more like an adventure book. Mine would be more of a how to avoid. I'm more of a hide and run than hide and seek person. Smiley face. I'm happy to hear Pop is doing so well. She's extinct in most dimensions of the here yet not here. I'm hoping ours survive, thrive, and breed. How did you learn to write poetry? I love reading yours. Mouse Eye has been visiting often. She does love chocolate chunky chip cookies, especially fresh from my oven. Laugh out loud. I'm sending some for you too. If none arrive, you know who swiped them. Laugh out loud. Love, your best bestie, Pip. And that's the end of the note. Pip called me adventurous. Me. I had to laugh. No, Pip, I'm not adventurous, but they do seem to find me regardless. And she said she likes my poetry. Well, I'll have to write one. I just need to think what about. Or maybe I can write one about how Mouse Eye seems to have developed a keen interest in chocolate chunky chip cookies. Apparently Pip sent them with this letter, but they didn't arrive. Or they did, but I just never got them. When I read the bit about the cookies, I looked over the letter at where Mouse Eye was sitting, looking all cute and innocent. But I think he felt my glare because he opened his eyes, gave a weak smile, belched a chocolate-laden burp, patted his tummy, then closed his eyes again. Little scamp! Cookie thief! Ah, to heck with it. I can't stay mad at him for long, but I did say I'd appreciate at least one cookie next time. He made a sound back that could have been agreement, or a light snore, or perhaps even something less polite. I do remember seeing him eating a cookie in Pip's pocket while I dreamed that night after being under the effects of the mushroom spores. I wonder just how much of that experience was real. I'm guessing more of it than I'd guessed. Anyway, I was finally feeling good again after recovering from my burn, ready to take on the day, whatever it might bring, embrace the fullness of somebody's coming down the path. The fullness of time to breathe, time to relax, time to trust in myself, whatever may happen. Embrace the fullness of the spirit of the cottage and grounds and knock, knock. Hello, Mistress Sweetwater. I opened my eyes when I recognized the voice. Cornelius McTwitter, the physician of High Rannoch, here. Mistress? But there was something wrong with his voice. It was like he was talking around something. I opened the door as he was starting to turn away. Ah, good, mistress. I'm so glad you're in. Doctor, I responded politely. Ish. I mean, he wants to kick me out of my cottage and turn the grounds into some sort of health resort, whatever that is. Can I come in? And then he smiled, revealing a broken tooth. I stepped out of the way and indicated a seat. How did your tooth end up broken? He gave a wan smile. There's quite the thing happening in town. Have you heard?
Are you referring to the supposed relationship between myself and the mayor?
Not exactly that, but that is part of it. High Rannoch is abuzz with the rumored affair, some defending you, some attacking, and many just listening raptly, soaking up the, and pardon me for saying, entertainment value. Bob was targeted by some people for having sold you that magnificent broom you flew out on the other day. Anyway, things were getting pretty animated. People began grabbing and swinging heavy things, and my tooth and I met one of those heavy things on a backswing. I dosed myself with painkillers and am now here hoping you can set my tooth right. I took a look in the book, and there was a recipe for shattered tooth. And I had everything in-house. I did consider, briefly, going out to collect reagents and letting the doctor sit and stew, but instead I decided to make a potion now, and to ask a few questions while I worked. The mayor did mention to me that you are interested in taking the cottage and converting it into some sort of health spot. It was a statement on the surface, but a question at its heart. When I first was here and you treated me, I must admit that my mind couldn't accept that you'd cure me. And so effectively and efficiently, I blame that on my bias against nature-based medicines, which I was taught in my medical school in Imperial City. Treat the humors, not the body, was an oft-repeated asseveration.
A what?
It was something the instructors would say, but never provide evidence that it was correct. We all learned it as more an article of faith than of science.
And then you came here
and you showed me just what a fool I was. You brew a potion and almost instantly the patient is cured. I am aware you helped young Robert, our town's adventurer.
I'd had the rat spit on a low boil and added it to the vampire venom and slime shell, both raw, and now let it sit and cool. So you don't want to take over here?
Goodness no. I say you should provide your kind of care here in your cottage, and I'll provide mine safely behind city walls.
So why did the mayor say he wants me out and you in here?
The doctor shook his head. I don't know, but I'm not interested in displacing you.
I handed over the cup. You'll want to kick this back in one go. Swirl it in your mouth before you swallow.
He accepted gratefully and did as I asked. Look, you are part of the medical team, if I may be so bold to say. You provide your services and I provide mine, and that way, High Rannoch citizens can be as healthy as they can be. And then he added, Ooh, it tingles. As he opened his mouth, I could see the tooth regenerating. It's one thing to get rid of someone's bad breath with a potion, but it's something else entirely to see a tooth growing. Literally growing. I have to ask, are you still trying to get an animated skeleton? He grimaced at that one. No, I've learned my lesson. I have an ordinary skeleton, and I point to where I need to direct attention. I figured if you don't need one, neither do I.
It should be another few minutes. Try not to rub your tongue over the tooth.
This is extraordinary. Had someone come to me with a broken tooth, I'd have been pulling it out and perhaps replacing it with some sort of bone. Elephant, perhaps.
I decided to ask one last question before the tooth was fully healed. Any idea who's helping the rumor along? Is the mayor saying drunken things again?
Cornelius looked serious this time. That's quite a thought. I hadn't considered that there'd be someone adding fuel to the flame, so to speak. I mean, you know the nature of rumors and how they morph and change, enlarge, I suppose you could say. And that's something I think everyone partakes in. But you're asking about someone being malicious about it. I don't think so. The mayor is saying nothing but looking rather smug. His wife is crying that another woman has led him astray. The teachers and staff are tittering at each other. I just don't know.
What was that about the mayor's wife?
Oh, apparently the mayor's been accused of straying from the marital bed in the past.
Ah.
Something didn't feel right, but I wasn't sure what it was. So I decided to let the doctor know how much he owed.
40 silver,
because it was a harder potion, and move on with the day. The thought of people getting violent, let alone spreading vicious rumors about me, was uncomfortable. I needed some time away again. Exercise in the bog had been one solution. Retail therapy leading to a trip to the Cloud Isles had been another.
Today, I wanted to walk among the trees in Glimmerwood Grove. We, Mouse Eye and I, can spend a day doing it, maybe gathering a thing or two, and maybe, hey, we can visit that elf that Mouse Eye had found the other day. Fun! Mouse Eye, what do you think about a day trip visit to the elf you visited the other day? Fun, right? He just froze and had this look that said so much and none of it good. I kept looking at him. He gave me a weak smile back. Must we? Just out of curiosity, what would cause any concern about visiting the elf? It sounded like he was eager for visitors. Mouse Eyes' face was frozen. Through closed lips, I got a mumbled, non-committal sound. Deep breaths, count to 10, tell myself that someday I'll find the funny in this situation, release. How about this? If we go visit the elf, do you think we'll be welcomed? Another non-committal sound. Okay, great. Well, I'm off. It'd be great if you came along to guide me to the elf rather than have me wander around trying to find him, but if it's going to be, for whatever reason, impractical for you to accompany me, I fully and non-judgmentally understand. If whatever happened between you and the elf is going to be a hindrance to helping guide me there, then it's completely fine that you not come. Yes, because in your telling of the tale, and I am heavily referring to your use of both the words for the long appendage that is part of you and a synonym for a story, you were so amazingly clever that you won the elf's favor. Well, I did. So off I go, and I won't come home until I've met the elf for myself, if for no other reason than to get his side of the story. Mouse Eye just closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then said, I may have, overstated, the elf's appreciation of my verbal trick. I crossed my arms. How overstated? He may refer to me as a cheat and a thief. So he wasn't amused when you, no. That cemented my determination. Great, then we'll head over there and make amends. Must. The I petered off. I think Mouse Eye might have swallowed it. Yes, we must. If nothing else, I want to be a good neighbor. Okay. And that was that. Off we headed. Mouse Eye sat on my shoulder the entire way. The trip was quiet, which suited me just fine. I rehearsed apologies, thought of ways to treat this ancient being that might be appropriate. Having no idea of any customs that he might expect me to know, I wondered if I could fake it well enough, and tried to keep issues that might be brought up in mind so that I wouldn't be speechless at any point. It was a lot to think in a short time. As we got closer to the location of the elf's court, we started to hear a voice, complaining and apparently in some amount of pain. I sped up, wondering what in the world could be wrong. The brambles that had obscured the entrance to the courtyard had been plowed over by something. Certainly something big, and not at all concerned by the prickles of the bushes. I stepped through and a lot more made sense. In the middle of the courtyard lay a sphinx. And not just any sphinx. It was the one I'd encountered a few weeks back. He was bleeding from an open wound in his chest. Kneeling next to him was an elf, speaking softly, tending to him. He glanced up as Mouse Eye and I strode in, then stood up angrily. I have no time to deal with you, thief, but you are not welcome here, and anyone who accompanies you is equally barred. Begone! I glanced at Mouse Eye sternly. He gave me a helpless shrug back. Sir, I'm aware my familiar gave offense earlier, and I'm here hoping to heal the rift from that, but I see someone in need of aid. May I be of service? He looked at me in annoyance, waved us away, and went back to the Sphinx. Feeling bolder than I had any right to feel, I walked up to the two figures, laid my hand on the Sphinx's shoulder, and vowed to return quickly with a healing potion. He thanked me, then said something about never going back, then went back to moaning in pain. I mentally ran through options for a cure and hit on one. Surgeon sap. We needed to find a particular tree, a nurse willow, and given how thirsty willows can be, I headed towards the boundary between the forest and the bog. It took a couple of trees to find the right kind and one that had sap congealing on its bark. I gathered a blob, then returned to the Sphinx. Re-entering the courtyard, I heard the Sphinx breathing easier, although the chest wound was still oozing. The elf was chanting something. He looked up and I held up the sap. He nodded for me to approach. If I'd been at home, I would have heated the sap to allow a portion to be placed like a poultice over the wound. Instead, I just had the Sphinx swallow the sap whole. It's a little bit sweet, so I think that helped it go down. The wound began to heal as we watched, first drying up, then starting to close. The elf stopped his chant. It was something to ease pain, and the Sphinx soon became his healthy self once more.
"I believe I owe you all an explanation," said the now standing Sphinx. "I staggered here from my perch in search of help. You see, I'm a Sphinx, and by tradition we ask a riddle to anyone who approaches. And by tradition you can pass if you get the riddle right, and you are eaten if you get it wrong. Thanks, however, to the generous nature of the witch before me, I learned that other penalties can be applied, such as the teaching of a new riddle, which I welcomed because, like I said before, I'm a vegetarian. Anyway, an adventurer approached earlier today. I posed. He answered incorrectly, but instead of teaching me a new riddle, he mocked me. As I began to scold him for his attitude, he stabbed me. He ran off, and I made my way here, and thanks to you both, I'm right as rain. But I'm never going back to that pedestal. Instead of blocking people from traveling forwards, I'm not sure what."
The noble elf looked thoughtful. "You may reside here with me. I believe we can trade stories for riddles. What say you?"
"Does a bear poop in the woods?"
The elf paused. "And perhaps we can study various forms of riddles and thereby increase your repertoire." He then looked at me. "You, I believe, are Mistress Sweetwater. Your actions were honorable. You are welcome to return here whenever you wish. As for your familiar, I'll consider his debt to me settled once he has told me 2 stories, not tales, over the next week." Mouse-Eye started. "I owed you 1. The elf answered, "Interest and penalties." Mouse-Eye shrugged. "Okay, as for the first tale, let's do this properly. We should sit back, enjoy refreshments, and allow this story to be savored properly." I'll say this about what followed. It was an event. Mouse-Eye took center stage and not only told his stories, but acted them out. He did the voices, he brought settings to life, let's just say he brought the house down. Twice. And as for the refreshments the elf provided, I figured we'd have something refreshing to drink or something like that, but what was served was beyond anything I'd ever had before. Maybe it's because I'd never had elvish food, and this bit of refreshment in the elvish world was simply that, but I found it simply amazing. Anyway, whatever bad blood had existed before was now well and done. Elf and mouse complemented each other. I breathed a sigh of relief. The Sphinx trundled off to his new lodgings, and I took that as a cue to excuse myself. All in all, a lovely day. And it remained lovely despite the fact that somewhere in all this I decided Fen needed a friend. A princess toad, to be exact. Why I thought it was a good idea, I don't know. But I did, and so off Mouse-Eye and I went in search of one. We did find princess toads, eventually. There weren't many around, and those we did find, well, you can't simply grab them. You have to ask if they'd like to leave their current situation and come join me in mine. To which they all replied, "No, thank you." You can't argue with that. We went home, tired but happy. It had been a busy day. Mouse-Eye settled onto the spirit house, and I was still mentally awake. So I decided to write a response to Pip. I addressed it to Pip, here yet not here, and sent it from Sweet, here yet not here. Dear Pip, thank you for your kind gift of chocolate chunk cookies. I'd like to say they were delicious, that they paired nicely with the tea I was drinking. Perhaps Mouse-Eye, when he next sees you, can tell you that they were, since he's the only one who knows. The little mischief maker didn't even leave a crumb for me. Your cookies may be delightful, and I may be more insightful, were it not for a mouse who lives in my house, who can apparently eat a plateful. I think it's funny that you think I'm so adventurous. Not true, but they do have a way of finding me. So rather than me being adventurous, I'd say adventures are sweeterous. Pop, by the way, has divided into two, and one of her is now part of the ancient broom I just bought. It's like a holiday lit broom now. Your best bestie, sweet. I figured I'd ask my little half-truth-telling cookie-addicted familiar to deliver it in the morning. But no sooner had I sealed up the letter, I heard a snap. I'd heard that sound before during my dream, and the one who'd snapped me then had been a small owl. Name's Birdie. We needed to talk, so here I am. Stay out of my world and I'll stay out of yours. Now give me that note. Good talk. Snap. And she was gone. What the? That was... Wow. Poor Pip. I took a second, more like many minutes, to sit and breathe and find my center again. Then for good measure, I went and gave Mouse Eye a quick peck on the head, and then decided it was time to go to bed. Episode 18, Spring, Week 9, Rest Episode. Message in a Bottle. These past few weeks, these past few days have been crazy. The mayor. Ooh, the mayor. Every time I think I've finally put it past me, it comes trotting back into my headspace and I feel the need to go off and do something. Something that allows me to refocus on myself and my well-being, that is. For now, whatever is happening in town can stay in town. I wonder if the town turned on the old witch and that's a reason why she left. Not that I haven't heard or imagined a few different reasons already. Maybe there were a bunch of factors, one of which was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and the town was one. And by the town, I mean the mayor. And there I go again. One of the benefits of my working through my frustrations with the mayor is that I'm taking time to explore different areas more deeply. I've been to the bog, the Isles, and the Grove, so I think I'll continue my explorations and go to the loch, by which I mean the beach. A bit of a swim, some time in the sun, and more time in the shade. My lovely tan, as lovely as it is, it doesn't need another burning to make it even darker. Pick a few reagents, of course, and overall have a relaxing time away. Hopefully this relaxation time won't involve my being chased by hungry flying lizards. I do hope I can finally get the whole mayor thing out of my head, out of my body, out of my space. Until then, I'm going to focus on me time. I put a few things together, let the spirit house know I was headed out, then popped onto my broom and flew off. What can I say about Vapor Trail now that she's been enhanced by Pop? She feels even more nimble than before, more able to dance in the air, and of course, the constant glow emanating from the broom. It was the epitome of the phrase, tripping the light fantastic. I suppose I could have flown straight to Meltwater Loch using the existing path. I suppose I didn't need to slalom around trees and sometimes through foliage, and I suppose I didn't need to experiment a little with standing on the bristles and working the broom like a surfboard, laughing at the ridiculousness of it. I didn't need to, but I wanted to, and I loved every minute. But I did want to go to the beach, so I did get there, eventually, and set up a spot in the dappled sun, but just steps from the water. Note to self, set up a hammock, but that's something for a different day. The day was perfect for laying in the warm sun, feeling the gentle breeze with a hint of salt, relaxing. No need to think about patience, no call to consider what I must do, and simply allow the day to pass without any worries, bothers, or distractions. Ah, what a lovely feeling. After a while, I decided to take a dip. It was, how should I put it, teeth-chatteringly cold. Yes, refreshing in much the same way that... Actually, I don't know in what other way the refreshingness of a cold dip into a deep loch can be replicated. Brrr! But it's also kind of addictive in its way. After getting out and warming up for a bit, I was ready for another round of plunging into the ice-blue water again. As I was getting in and out repeatedly, I figured I'd collect a few things. Nothing stressful or difficult to find, just things that required minimal effort to get. Smooth croak, for example. I'd collected the mucus from the colorful frogs before. This time I decided to offer one of them a new home. And just like that, one of them hopped towards Vapor Trail. I like simple. And another simple request was made, this time for snails, producers of slime shell, to come live with me. A few started their slow but steady way towards the broom. Speaking of simple, I collected more deep reed. Last time there were wigfish aplenty, but this time there were no vein swimmers around. In fact, I ended up with only 2 new things. The first was something called Mermaid's Gift. Why a toxic algae has gift in the name baffles me, and the fact that it's something primarily used to cure male pattern baldness leaves, I don't know, half the population of the world only seeing it as something not to put into a seafood stew. It just irks me. A boy dies years ago and suddenly the herbology school isn't letting students experience real-life experiences. Who knows how many girls disappeared or even died? But something happens to one boy, granted it was the head family's son, and everything has to change. Really? And then the whole thing with the mayor. He makes some sort of accusation, or perhaps not even, and all of a sudden my reputation is being examined and judged. It's so frustrating. But I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. Which brings me to the second new thing I found. A bottle. A sealed bottle. An old sealed bottle. With, on my first examination of it, a letter inside. A message in a bottle. Rather than open it on the beach, I decided to bring it back with me to the cottage. I'm so glad I waited to open it. With all these things found and collected, and the snails finally finishing their huge 100-meter trek to the broom, I couldn't help them. They have pride, you know. I decided to pack up and head back. Impatiently, I made my way back using the fastest route I could think of, got everything and everyone situated, made a quick meal, then, as it cooled, I opened the bottle. The reason I was so happy to have waited until I was home is because the bottle was packed with paper. Packed! It took a bit of coaxing to get the papers to come out without tearing. I began eating and reading. And reading. And reading some more. The amount of ink alone was enough to make the letter heavy, let alone the quality paper. And the bottle itself, it looked like one of those stained glass windows they use in posh mansions and houses of worship. I didn't think they were seaworthy. Turns out they usually aren't, but this bottle, made to emulate those windows, was. I won't bother trying to summarize everything here, but do know there was a lot said about the sender of the letter, who signed it Lady Copeland. She talked about the sting of winter winds, the wish to see Stu and Andy, friends of hers, minstrels, I believe, in the coming months, having seen them on several of the preceding summers, and all sorts of domestic things happening in and around Imperial City. Imperial City! While I'd only become recently aware of such a place, this letter was from someone living there. But there were also tales of difficulties. The police, apparently, were tasked not only with fighting crime, but with controlling its citizens' behaviors as well. In particular, or at least for Lady Copeland, was the fact that while she desired to write, to be a poet or an author, to take her thoughts on the rights of all, regardless of gender, race, color, etc., to the public, she couldn't. Not only was she prevented from publishing, she wasn't allowed to share her thoughts with anyone. Being a lady of means meant that she did have access to things mostly stored away in forgotten rooms inside her mansion. Ink and paper were easy. She could write to friends, no problem. It was the bottle that was the big find for her, because it had a magic on it that would allow it to act like a carrier pigeon, of sorts. Once it had found an endpoint, it could travel the waters between on its own. Aside from the already mentioned day-to-day goings-on in the brief thesis, as she described it anyway, I didn't think it short. She also included a poem because she hoped to find not just someone interested in equality, but also knowledgeable in literature. This is what she wrote.
Perambulating like doxy muskrats,
pennant-filled joyous colors, accusatory commingling rough with sweet, flabbergasted pawns enraged, dissecting rainbows vainglorious of crinoline and silk, and asked for honest feedback. Well, there are a lot of big words with lots of meaning in them, but put together like that, I have no idea what it means. And maybe that's the point? I think I'm going to have to give the return letter a bit of a think. Maybe send Lady Copeland a sample of my poetry. But would someone like her enjoy what I write? I think I'll sleep on it. Change of scene. I slept on it. I can't say I found any clarity overnight, but maybe with pencil in hand and blank paper in front of me, I'll write something witty or... I think I'll just write what comes to mind. With pencil hovering over paper but not knowing how to begin, What's all the racket? Why is everyone croaking? Or at least, why is everyone who naturally croaks croaking? Putting down my pencil and secretly relieved at not staring at the blank page, I went outside to see what was up. I headed for Fenz's place. Mouseye ended up on my shoulder halfway there. The snails found something. The snails? Okay. Minutes later, I found out what all the fuss was. There was a letter addressed to the old witch, unopened. How it had ended up being mostly buried in bracken, I'll never know, but what is certain is that the old witch never opened it. I contemplated just leaving it, figuring it was not my business. But then I reasoned that if it affected the cottage or grounds, I should know. And to be honest, reading the letter meant not having to write mine. I thanked everyone for their diligence, then brought the letter back to the cottage. What was it that the letter said? Turns out the old witch, when she was planning her journey to Imperial City, had actually had a bit of a schedule and had made lodging arrangements. This letter was in response to her request for a year's lease on a cottage outside of the city, which, given that she had her pet cow with her, made sense. However, in the reply, it said that while no cottages were presently available, they did have a lovely apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that overlooks a market square. It also stated that unless she replied back within 2 weeks, that would be her reserved lodgings. The only words I could think were, cow pie, oh my. And as I laughed and thought about all the difficulties of having a cow climb 3 flights of stairs, not to mention the feeding and bathroom needs of Humphrey, I started to hear a poem. So I wrote it down. Some time ago, a letter was sent to confirm a room and appropriate rent, but missed within the conversation, a cow is part of the whole equation. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when a 3rd floor room becomes a stall. The noise, the smell, the mess, oh my, with hay and hooves and, of course, cow pies. And then I set to writing my response. I introduced myself and gave some basic details. I told her that my skill with poetry wasn't at her level at all, but that the work sounded grand when spoken aloud, and that I hoped she'd enjoy something of mine. I signed it, sealed it inside the gorgeous bottle, flew to the lock, and set the bottle in the water near to where I'd found it. I watched as it oriented itself, began moving through the water and leaving naught but the slightest wake, then dropped out of sight when it dove down into the depths. I don't know how long it'll take for the bottle to make its journey, or if the lady will find it when it returns. I do hope she has a bit of a laugh when she reads my poem. I find it interesting that I'm now corresponding with 2 people, both of whom I'll probably never meet, both of whom talk about being alone, or at least feeling alone. It's like we're castaways, maybe not literally shipwrecked on a deserted island, but figuratively. The lovely thing is, I think, we know our value to the world, and maybe, just maybe, we can feel less alone in our being alone. So I hope you enjoyed everything that you heard, and I do hope you'll come back for the next compilation, narration-only compilation that comes out in a 2-3 months' time. And yeah, that'll be the entire story done, complete. And so yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.